bird, tie me up," the Apache woman said to the rancher who bought her, asking for her freedom. The sun had barely begun its climb over the horizon when the small Apache village stirred to life. Children rubbed sleep from their eyes, elders murmured prayers to the wind and sky, and women moved quietly, tending to the morning tasks that kept their homes alive. Among them was a young woman named Aylin. She had always been known for her sharp mind and steady courage, qualities that made her stand out in the village. Today, however, those qualities would be tested in ways she could never imagine. Aylin had risen early to help her mother gather herbs and prepare the day's food. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of smoke from the previous night's fires. As she moved through the tall grasses near the edge of the village, she felt a strange unease. The birds were unusually silent, and the wind seemed to carry whispers she could not understand. Breath. She shook off the feeling, telling herself it was only the quiet of early morning. But deep inside, a sense of danger began to take root. By mid-morning, the village had begun to bustle with activity. Children played near the water, women wove baskets, and men checked the edges of the village for signs of the herds that would feed them. Aylin was helping her mother when a sudden sharp sound pierced the air. A whistle, not of their own, one that carried a foreign warning. Then, chaos erupted. Figures on horseback appeared on the horizon, moving swiftly and purposefully toward the village. They were strangers, armed and determined, with a presence that radiated threat. Panic spread quickly. Mothers called for their children, elders shouted instructions, and the villagers tried desperately to protect what they could. Aylin's heart pounded in her chest. She grabbed her younger brother and ran toward the trees, hoping to find shelter. But the strangers were too fast. Within moments, they were surrounded, and the sense of safety Aylin had known all her life was gone. The leader of the strangers approached with an air of authority, speaking words Aylin could not fully understand, pointed, gestured, and demanded obedience. Fear twisted in her stomach, but she forced herself to remain calm. She had been taught to face danger with clear eyes and a steady mind, and she drew on that lesson now. The villagers were quickly separated, some taken to one side, others to another. Aylin felt the rough hands pull her away from her family. Her mother's eyes met hers, filled with silent pleading and sorrow. Aylin wanted to speak, to promise she would return, but words failed her. The ride away from the village was long and jarring. Aylin was placed on a horse that did not belong to her, her hands bound loosely but firmly. She could feel the muscles in her arms ache from holding tension, and her mind raced with questions she could not answer. Where were they taking her? Who were these people? Would she ever see her home again? Despite her fear, she refused to show weakness. She straightened her back, lifted her chin, and observed everything. The way the riders moved, the direction of the sun, the changes in the landscape. Every detail might one day help her find a way back. Desperation. As the sun climbed higher, they reached a small trading post. The smells of cooked meat, smoke, and leather filled the air. Aylin's captors handed her over to a man standing nearby, a rancher known for purchasing workers from such encounters. The rancher looked at her with a measured gaze, his face unreadable. Aylin, though exhausted and afraid, met his eyes with a steadiness that surprised even her. She did not plead or cry. She simply observed, taking note of the man's demeanor, the layout of the buildings, and the way he carried himself. The transaction was brief, a few words exchanged, a small pile of coins, and the reality of her situation settled like a heavy weight on her shoulders. Aylin was no longer free. She was now property in a world that valued her not for her spirit or courage, but for her labor. Yet even in this moment, she refused to let despair take hold. She told herself that survival depended on patience, observation, and courage. But she would endure, and she would find a way to reclaim her life. The rancher led her to his property, a sprawling landscape of open fields, wooden buildings, and fenced areas. The house stood tall and solid, a place of authority and control. Island noticed the quiet discipline of the ranch hands, the precision in the way animals were tended, and the careful attention the rancher paid to every detail. Though it was not her home, she recognized the order and purpose in this place. She could use it to her advantage. Knowledge was power, and she began silently noting the routines and patterns around her. Her first days on the ranch were a mixture of fear and adaptation. She learned quickly what was expected of her: chores, tending animals, and assisting with daily tasks. She moved with careful attention, mindful not to draw unnecessary attention, yet determined to understand the rhythm of her new environment. The rancher observed her closely, assessing her work and her attitude. Island realized that while she had lost her physical freedom, she had not yet lost her ability to influence how she was treated. At night, when the work was done, Aylin would sit quietly under the stars. She thought of her village, her family, and the life that had been stolen from her. But she also began to plan, quietly and methodically, for a future where she could make choices again. She considered the rancher, the man who had purchased her, and wondered if there was a way to earn not just his respect, but her freedom. It was a dangerous thought, one that required careful timing and courage, but it was a seed of hope she could not ignore. As the days passed, Island noticed small details that gave her strength. The rancher, though firm, was fair in his dealings. He valued honesty and effort, and he responded to courage rather than fear. She began to understand that her survival and eventual freedom might depend on her ability to navigate this delicate balance. She could not act recklessly, yet she could not remain passive. Every step, every word, every glance had to be measured. By the end of her first week, Island had earned a cautious respect from the ranch hands. They saw her as capable and intelligent, someone who could endure hardship and still maintain dignity. Even the rancher seemed to recognize her potential, though he kept his thoughts to himself. Island knew that earning trust in this world was not enough. She had to prove herself continuously, showing that she could be responsible and steadfast. The nights on the ranch were long, and Aylin often woke to the sounds of the wind through the trees, thinking of her village and the family she had left behind. She clung to memories of home, her mother's laughter, her brother's mischievous smile, the warmth of familiar faces. These memories became her anchor, giving her strength to face each day. She understood that the path ahead would be challenging, but she was determined not to let fear or despair define her story. As the sun set each evening, casting long shadows across the ranch, Aylin would take a deep breath and remind herself of her inner resolve. She had survived the raid, endured the ride, and adapted to the new environment. She had begun to understand the people around her, the dynamics of the ranch, and the subtle ways to influence her own fate. Though she was still far from freedom, she had discovered a powerful truth. Courage and intelligence could be as liberating as any key or coin. By the end of the first part of her journey, Aylin had transformed from a frightened captive into a young woman quietly determined to reclaim her life. The ranch was not home, and the rancher was not yet an ally. But she could see opportunities where others might see only walls. Her mind was sharp, her spirit unbroken, and her heart full of hope. She had survived the first test, and she was already preparing for the next challenge. The challenge of freedom in a world that had taken so much from her. The days on the ranch settled into a rhythm, and Aylin began to understand the delicate balance of her new life. Each morning the sun would rise over the wide open fields, casting a golden light across the fences and barns. Birds chirped overhead, and the faint smell of hay and leather filled the air. Though the land was vast and beautiful, it was not her home, and every step reminded her that she was far from her family and the village she had known. Island's work on the ranch was demanding. From sunrise, she helped with chores, feeding the animals, cleaning stables, and mending fences. The ranch hands, initially distant, began to watch her carefully. They noticed the way she moved with precision, how she handled the animals with patience, and the way she quietly absorbed every detail of life on the ranch. Even tasks that seemed menial were opportunities for Aylin to learn and understand the routines of the ranch. She realized quickly that observation was as important as action. The rancher, whose name was Silas, was a man of quiet authority. He did not shout or command without reason, but his eyes missed nothing. He watched Aylin work, noting her focus, her strength, and her resilience. Unlike others who might have punished mistakes harshly, Silas corrected her gently but firmly, guiding her toward better work rather than demanding obedience out of fear.
Aylin recognized this as both a challenge and an opportunity.
She could earn not only survival but also respect if she approached her work with care and intelligence. Despite the physical labor, Aylin found moments to connect with the animals. Horses, with their quiet strength and gentle eyes, seemed to understand her in a way humans did not. She spent time brushing the coats of the young foals, whispering soft words she had learned from her mother and noticing subtle signs of illness or fear in the animals. The rancher began to take note of this as well, admiring how Aylin's patience and empathy made her work more effective than mere strength could. Slowly, the invisible walls between her and the ranch began to soften. Evenings were the hardest. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields, Aylin would sit quietly near the stables. Breath. She thought of her village, her family, and the life that had been taken from her. She remembered her mother's gentle guidance, her brother's laughter, and the safety of the familiar paths through the trees. These memories became her anchor, giving her courage for the day ahead. Sometimes she allowed herself a few moments of silent tears, letting grief wash through her, knowing that acknowledging her pain was part of surviving it. Aylin also began to understand the rhythms of the ranch itself. She noticed the way the ranch hands moved during different tasks, how Silas conducted his inspections of the animals, and even the patterns of the sun and wind across the open fields. She realized that knowledge gave her power, even in captivity. By understanding routines and patterns, she could anticipate needs, avoid danger, and quietly influence her environment. This understanding was not a rebellion. It was survival. Interactions with Silas were careful and measured. He did not speak often, but when he did, it was with intention. One afternoon, as Aylin helped repair a fence, he came to stand beside her, watching the way she worked. "You have a steady hand," he said, his voice calm and precise. "That's something not everyone has." Aylin nodded, choosing her words carefully. Desperate. "I was taught to notice details," she replied. Silas seemed to consider this, a faint glimmer of respect in his eyes. These small exchanges became a silent dialogue, a way to measure trust and understanding without speaking of freedom directly. Aylin also noticed the subtle hierarchy among the ranch hands. Some were kind and helpful, while others were skeptical and distant. She learned quickly how to navigate these relationships, offering assistance where she could, avoiding unnecessary conflicts, and maintaining dignity in her work. She realized that respect was not given. It was earned, even in a place where she was not truly free.
By demonstrating courage, intelligence, and patience, she could carve a small space of safety for herself in a world that often seemed harsh and unforgiving.
As weeks passed, the ranch became more familiar to her. She could anticipate the chores before they were called out, predict the behavior of the animals, and even sense the moods of the ranch hands. Though she was still a captive, Aylin began to feel a quiet sense of agency. She was learning that freedom was not only about leaving a place, it was also about understanding it, mastering it, and finding ways to influence it, even subtly. There were moments of danger, too. Once, a young colt became startled and broke free from its pen. The chaos could have caused injury, but Aylin acted quickly, remembering every detail of the rancher's instructions and the animal's behavior. But She calmed the horse, guiding it back to safety. Silas observed her from a distance, his expression unreadable. Breaths. Later he nodded once, a small but meaningful acknowledgement of her skill and courage. Moments like these built trust, and trust could one day lead to opportunity. Eileen also began to notice her own strength and resilience. Each day she pushed herself physically and mentally, reminding herself that survival depended on vigilance, patience, and courage. "Dad," she practiced quiet observation, learning the subtleties of human behavior. When someone was truthful, when they were hiding something, when an opportunity could be seized. These skills were not just for survival, they were tools that could eventually lead to freedom. But she was no longer just enduring. She was planning. Despite the harsh realities of her life, there were small moments of beauty. The sunrise over the fields, the quiet neigh of a horse, the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. These moments reminded her of the world beyond captivity. She cherished them, allowing herself a sense of peace and hope. Eileen understood that even in hardship, the mind and heart could find refuge, and that these small treasures were just as important as any physical freedom. One day, as Eileen worked near the barn, she observed Silas interacting with one of the ranch hands. His fairness and measured decisions were evident, and she began to understand the values he held.
Unlike the raiders who had taken her from her home, Silas seemed to believe in order, respect, and the worth of hard work.
Eileen realized that while he had purchased her labor, he was not cruel or arbitrary. This understanding gave her a new sense of strategy. If she could earn his trust and demonstrate her courage, she might find a way to negotiate her freedom without risking her life. As the sun set that evening, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold, Eileen felt a quiet determination growing inside her. She would continue her work, learn every detail of the ranch, and find ways to influence her situation. Or she would remain patient, observing carefully, speaking cautiously, and acting wisely. Freedom was not yet within her grasp, but she had discovered that her mind and courage were powerful tools. Even in captivity, she was not powerless. By the end of Part 2, Eileen had begun to transform her life on the ranch. Though she was still far from home, she had established routines, earned small trust, and discovered the strength within herself. The ranch was no longer just a place of confinement. It had become a stage where she could demonstrate her intelligence, courage, and resilience. Every day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new opportunities. Eileen understood that survival alone was not enough. She needed to learn, to adapt, and to plan for the moment when she could finally reclaim her freedom. Through the work, observation, and quiet moments of reflection, Eileen was preparing herself for the next step of her journey. She knew that courage alone would not be enough. She needed strategy, patience, and an understanding of those around her. Yet she felt hope, a quiet, burning hope, that one day her courage and intelligence would open the door to a life of her own choosing. And with that hope, she continued each day, resilient, watchful, and unbroken. The months on the ranch passed with steady rhythm, and Eileen had begun to feel more confident in her understanding of the land, the animals, and the people around her. Each day brought routine and labor, yet beneath the surface, a quiet plan was forming in her mind. Bets. She knew that if she wanted freedom, she would have to be careful, clever, and courageous. The longer she stayed on the ranch, the more she understood that patience and observation were her strongest tools. Eileen had learned to read the smallest cues in Silas's behavior, the way he walked through the fields, the moments when he spoke softly to the ranch hands, and even the brief glances he gave her when he thought she was unaware. All of these told her more than words could. She had discovered that Silas was not cruel, but he was firm, a man who valued honesty, courage, and skill above all else. This knowledge gave her a sense of strategy. If she could demonstrate these qualities, perhaps she could earn not only respect, but also the possibility of choice, of freedom. One late afternoon, as the sun began to cast long shadows across the fields, Aylin worked alongside the ranch hands repairing a section of the fence that had been damaged during a storm burst. Her hands were blistered and sore, but she worked steadily, her mind focused on more than the task at hand. She thought about the conversation she had observed, the routines she had memorized, and the subtle ways in which Silas rewarded honesty and diligence. She realized that a bold step could not be taken recklessly. It had to be calculated, respectful, and grounded in courage. Aylin knew she had earned a small measure of trust. Silas had complimented her on her work with the animals, and the ranch hands had begun to rely on her judgment in difficult situations. She also recognized that he respected her ability to remain calm under pressure and her unwavering commitment to the tasks assigned to her. This understanding gave her hope, but also a deeper awareness of the risks. A mistake, a moment of fear, or even a poorly chosen word could undo all the progress she had made. She would need to be precise, confident, and persuasive in her next move. That evening, as the sky turned shades of orange and purple, Aylin approached Silas with a quiet determination. He was inspecting the barn, checking the animals and making notes in a small book he carried. She waited for a moment when he seemed focused on the horses and then spoke, her voice steady and calm. "Silas," she began, "I would like to ask you something. It is unusual, but I believe it is important." Silas turned to her, his expression calm but curious. He had grown accustomed to her quiet confidence, though nothing she had said before had prepared him for what came next. "Go ahead," he said, his voice measured. "Tell me what it is." Aylin took a deep breath, steadying herself. She knew that every word mattered. "Breath, I would like you to tie me up," she said, choosing her words carefully. Not as a punishment, but as a test. A test of courage and trust. If you agree, it would mean that you see me as more than property, and it would show me that I can take steps toward freedom with honor. Silas's eyes widened slightly, though he quickly regained his composed expression. He studied her for a long moment, trying to understand her meaning. The request was bold, unexpected, and difficult to comprehend at first. Why would a captive ask to be tied up? But it seemed counterintuitive, even risky. Yet in Aylin's eyes he saw sincerity, intelligence, and courage, the very qualities he valued in others on his ranch. "Why would you ask such a thing?" he asked, his tone calm but probing. He needed to understand her motive before making any decision. "Best, you are already under my care. You have work to do." Frowned. "What purpose does this serve?"
Aylin met his gaze without hesitation. "It is not a request for punishment," she explained.
"It is a test of trust and respect. It is a way for me to show that I am willing to face fear with courage, and that I can act with honesty even when it is difficult. If you grant this, it will prove that we can rely on each other and that my freedom can be approached responsibly, not recklessly." Silas was silent for a long moment. He had dealt with many people in his life, but few had approached him with such clarity, intelligence, and courage. He began to understand that Aylin was not asking for a game or attention. She was proposing a controlled challenge, one that could reveal character, strength, and trust. This was not only brave but rare, and it required careful consideration. "Very well," he said finally, his voice measured and steady. "I will consider your request. But you must understand that if I agree, it will be under strict conditions. It will be controlled, safe, and observed. This is not a decision to be taken lightly. Do you understand?" Aylin nodded without hesitation. "I understand. I accept whatever conditions you choose. I only ask for the chance to demonstrate my courage and to earn a measure of freedom with honor." Over the next several days, Silas prepared for the test. He arranged a safe area in the barn where Aylin could be tied in a way that posed no danger to her, yet still required patience, calmness, and trust. He explained the procedure to her carefully, outlining the rules and expectations. Aylin listened attentively, memorizing every detail. She knew that her behavior during this time would determine not only the success of the test, but also the level of trust Silas was willing to place in her moving forward. When the day of the test arrived, the ranch hands and Silas watched closely, maintaining a respectful distance. Aylin approached the task with quiet determination, her mind focused on the challenge ahead. She allowed herself to be tied, trusting that Silas would honor the conditions he had outlined. As the ropes were secured, she remained calm, steady, and observant. Every muscle in her body was relaxed, every breath measured, but of deliberate courage. Time passed slowly. Aylin remained patient, aware of the expectations and the eyes that watched her. She reflected on her journey to this point, the capture, the ride to the ranch, the months of labor, and the quiet strategies she had developed to survive and learn. Each memory fueled her determination. She understood that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. Silas observed her carefully, noting her composure, her attention to detail, and the calm strength she exhibited. He began to see the truth in her words. This was not a test of rebellion or disobedience, but a demonstration of courage, intelligence, and self-control. Slowly, he began to respect her in a way that went beyond ownership. Aylin had shown him that freedom and responsibility could coexist, even in a place where she was technically his property. The test ended without incident, and Aylin was untied. She stood, taking a deep breath, feeling the weight of the ropes leave her body. Silas approached her, his expression thoughtful. "You have shown courage, patience, and intelligence," he said. "I respect that. You have earned more than I thought possible in such a short time. I see now that freedom is not just a matter of distance or ownership. It is a matter of character." Aylin bowed her head slightly, acknowledging his words. "Thank you," she said softly. "I only wish to act with honor, even in difficult circumstances."
That is how I hope to earn my future. From that day forward, the relationship between Aylin and Silas began to shift. There was a new layer of trust and mutual respect.
Silas recognized her intelligence, courage, and integrity, while Aylin understood the boundaries, expectations, and rules she needed to navigate. Though she was still technically a captive, the dynamics had changed. She had earned a measure of agency, and had proven that her freedom could be approached responsibly and with honor. Life on the ranch continued, but Aylin now carried herself with a quiet confidence that had been absent before. She worked diligently, observed carefully, and continued to learn the rhythms of the ranch. Her interactions with Silas were marked by a subtle understanding, a recognition that courage, intelligence, and trust were qualities worth honoring.
The other ranch hands noticed the shift as well, beginning to treat her with respect and deference.
Aylin's mind was always alert, always considering the next step. She knew that this test was only the beginning of a longer journey, one that would eventually lead to true freedom. But she also understood that courage, patience, and strategy could accomplish what brute force never could. Each day she strengthened her body, sharpened her mind, and nurtured her spirit, preparing for the challenges ahead. As the sun set over the wide fields, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Aylin felt a quiet sense of pride. She had faced fear, demonstrated courage, and earned respect through intelligence and patience. She had not just survived. She had begun to shape her destiny, step by step. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, she knew that one day her freedom would not only be possible, but deserved. The days that followed Aylin's bold request were unlike any she had experienced on the ranch before. There was a subtle shift in the air, almost imperceptible, but it made everything feel different. The ranch hands moved with their usual routines, yet there was a quiet acknowledgement in their glances. Silas, too, seemed more thoughtful, observing her with an attention that went beyond her work. Island understood that her courage and intelligence had left an impression, and she resolved to prove herself further, not just for freedom, but to show that her character could be trusted. Silas had spoken to her privately, outlining what he called the trial. It was not a test of obedience or strength, but a demonstration of self-control, patience, and understanding. Island would be tied in a controlled way, under careful supervision, while she completed a set of tasks and made decisions that would reveal her judgment and courage. The trial would last several hours, during which she would have to remain calm, attentive, and thoughtful. The morning of the trial dawned clear and bright. The ranch was quiet, the animals grazing peacefully, the fields bathed in golden light. Aylin felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness, but she reminded herself that she had prepared for this moment with every lesson she had learned since arriving at the ranch. She had trained her body, sharpened her mind, and strengthened her spirit.
This was her opportunity to demonstrate that courage and intelligence could earn respect and lay the foundation for freedom.
Silas led her to a small enclosed area near the barn, where the ropes and preparations had been carefully arranged. The space was safe, with no risk of injury, yet it required attention and care. He explained the procedure once more, detailing each step, each rule, and each expectation. "You will be tied," he said. "But this is not a punishment, Burge. It is a chance to show your courage, patience, and judgment. I will be watching, and the ranch hands will observe as well. Remember, your calmness and careful thinking are what matter most." Island nodded, taking a deep breath to steady herself.
"I understand," she replied. "I will act with honor and patience."
Silas studied her face for a long moment, then allowed the ranch hands to secure the ropes. As the knots tightened gently around her wrists and ankles, Aylin felt the physical weight of restriction, but she did not panic. She stood tall, breathing evenly, focusing her mind on the tasks ahead. This was not confinement. It was a challenge. And she was ready. The first part of the trial involved the animals. A young horse had become restless, and Aylin was expected to calm it using her knowledge and observation. Though she could not move freely, she relied on her voice, her gestures, and her understanding of animal behavior. She spoke softly, maintaining a steady tone, and slowly guided the horse toward calmness. Silas watched closely, noting her patience and skill. Even the ranch hands exchanged glances, impressed by her ability to handle a difficult situation while physically restrained. Next, Aylin was presented with a situation that required careful judgment. A small section of fencing had been damaged, and the animals could potentially wander if not secured. But she could not fix it herself because of the ropes. But she had to make decisions about how to ensure safety.
Island observed the environment, noting the positions of the animals, the tools available, and the actions of the ranch hands.
She called out clear instructions directing the helpers to secure the fence and guide the animals safely. Her calm, precise commands revealed leadership and intelligence, earning nods of approval from Silas. Throughout the trial, Island faced moments of discomfort and frustration. Her body ached from being tied, and the sun warmed the enclosed space, making her slightly fatigued. But justice remained steady, drawing strength from her inner resolve. She reminded herself that courage was not the absence of difficulty, but the ability to continue despite it. Each task she completed, each decision she made, reinforced her confidence and demonstrated to Silas that she could handle responsibility, even under challenging circumstances. Silas began to speak to her in quiet, deliberate tones, asking questions that tested her judgment and values.
"If an animal is in danger, but fixing it risks harm to you, what would you do?" he asked.
Island thought carefully before responding.
Breath. I would ensure the animal is safe first, using every resource and instruction available, she said. But I would not act recklessly. Courage must include careful thinking, not just boldness. Silas nodded, clearly impressed. Her answers reflected not only intelligence, but also integrity, a quality he valued deeply. The trial continued for hours, each moment revealing more about Island's character. She managed multiple challenges at once, guiding the ranch hands, observing the animals, and maintaining her composure. The ropes that bound her body could not restrain her mind or her courage. Psst. She adapted to each situation, thinking ahead, responding calmly, and demonstrating the qualities that had always set her apart. Silas remained nearby, watching with a quiet respect that grew with each passing task. Aside, even when minor accidents occurred, a tool falling, a horse spooking briefly, Aylin remained composed. She assessed each situation carefully, directing corrective actions without panic. The ranch hands, who had initially treated her with curiosity or skepticism, now observed with admiration. They whispered quietly among themselves, recognizing that Aylin was more than just a worker. She was a person of insight, courage, and strength. Break. As the afternoon wore on, Aylin faced the final part of the trial, a decision that required both judgment and trust. One of the gates had been left slightly open and an animal was nearby. She had to decide how to secure it, who to direct, and what instructions to give, all while remaining physically restricted. Aylin analyzed the situation quickly, recalling every lesson from her weeks on the ranch. Bryce's. She gave precise commands, guided the ranch hands, and ensured that the animal was safe without putting herself or anyone else at risk. Silas watched closely, noting the calm decisiveness with which she acted. When the trial was complete, Silas approached her. The ropes were untied carefully, and Aylin stood, stretching her arms and legs after the long period of restraint. Desperate, she felt a sense of accomplishment and pride, knowing that she had succeeded not only in performing the tasks but also in demonstrating the qualities that mattered most. Silas studied her face, his expression thoughtful and approving. "You have shown patience, intelligence, courage, and integrity," he said. "I respect you for this." Despair. A few people, even free men, could have maintained composure under these circumstances.
Aylin bowed her head slightly, a quiet smile on her lips. "Thank you," she said softly.
"I only wish to act with honor and demonstrate that I am capable of making responsible choices." Silas nodded, acknowledging her words. He had seen not just physical endurance but also the strength of character that could not be measured by work alone. In that moment, a subtle shift occurred between them. He began to see her not as property, but as a person whose judgment and courage deserved recognition. The ranch hands gathered quietly, offering small nods of approval. Even those who had been skeptical began to treat her with respect, recognizing the qualities she had demonstrated. Aylin understood that the trial had not just been about completing tasks. It had been about proving her character, her resilience, and her capacity for responsible action. She had earned a measure of trust that could not be taken lightly, and she felt a quiet pride in what she had accomplished. That evening, as the sun set and the sky turned shades of pink and gold, Aylin reflected on the trial. She realized that freedom was not just a physical state, but also a matter of trust, respect, and character. She had faced fear, discomfort, and challenge, and she had emerged with her dignity intact. The trial had shown her that courage, intelligence, and patience could create opportunities even in circumstances that seemed impossible. Silas spoke to her one last time that day, his voice calm but sincere. "You have proven yourself in a way that few could," he said. "I see now that you are capable of responsibility, courage, and wise judgment. That is more valuable than any obedience. Remember this lesson. It will guide you toward freedom when the time comes." Island nodded, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. She knew that her journey was far from over, but the trial had strengthened her resolve. She had shown that courage, intelligence, and patience could open doors even when the path seemed blocked. She had earned trust, respect, and a quiet measure of agency, all of which would guide her toward the ultimate goal: true freedom. As night fell over the ranch, Island lay beneath the stars, reflecting on the lessons of the day. She had faced trials that tested her body, mind, and spirit, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined. The ropes that had once bound her had become symbols, not of captivity, but of courage and trust. And in that quiet, starlit moment, she understood that freedom was not only about leaving the ranch. It was about preparing herself to step into it with honor, dignity, and strength. The days following the trial were different on the ranch. A quiet understanding had grown between Aylin and Silas, one that went beyond commands, chores, and routine. He treated her with a subtle respect that had never been present before. The ranch hands, too, had begun to notice the change, seeing in her a combination of courage, intelligence, and resilience that demanded acknowledgement. Aylin, though still technically a captive, began to feel a small measure of agency that had been impossible in the months before. She continued her work as she always had, feeding the animals, repairing fences, tending to the land. But now she did so with a different awareness. Every task was a demonstration of her capabilities, a reminder of her strength, patience, and intelligence. She understood that true freedom might not come immediately, but every action, every decision, every word was a step toward it. She had learned that patience and strategy could be as important as courage and physical strength. One morning, as the sun rose over the wide fields, Silas called her to the edge of the barn. There was a quiet seriousness in his voice, and Aylin approached cautiously, sensing that something important was about to happen. Aylin, he began, I have watched you for many weeks now. I have seen your courage, your intelligence, and your patience. You have proven yourself not only capable but honorable. I believe it is time to give you a choice. Aylin felt her heart quicken. A choice. The words were small, but their meaning was vast. She had longed for this moment, dreamed of it in the quiet of the nights, and planned for it carefully. Now, it was real. She met Silas's gaze steadily, refusing to let fear or hesitation take hold. I understand, she said softly. Thank you for considering me worthy of this choice. Silas nodded. You are free to leave the ranch if you wish. You may return to your home, your family, your people. Or, if you prefer, you may remain here for a short time, under terms of mutual respect and cooperation, until you are ready to make your journey. The choice is yours. Aylin felt a wave of emotions, relief, joy, and gratitude mingled with lingering sorrow for the family she had been taken from. But she had survived fear, endured hardship, and demonstrated courage beyond what she had imagined possible. She had earned respect, trust, and now the opportunity to reclaim her freedom. Her heart swelled with hope, but she also knew that her decision must be thoughtful, guided by careful reasoning, not just impulse. After a moment of reflection, Aylin spoke. I wish to return to my family, she said, her voice calm but determined. I have learned much here, and I am grateful for the lessons and the respect shown to me. But my home, my people, and my family are where I belong. I must return to them. Silas studied her for a long moment, then nodded with quiet approval. Very well, he said. I will help you prepare for the journey. You have earned your freedom through courage, intelligence, and patience. Go with my respect and the knowledge that you have proven yourself in every way. The following days were filled with preparations. Silas ensured that Aylin had what she needed for the journey: provisions for food and water, guidance on the safest routes, and advice on how to avoid danger along the way. He treated her with respect and care, demonstrating the same principles of fairness and thoughtfulness that had guided his actions throughout her time on the ranch. Eileen observed these preparations with gratitude, recognizing that respect and integrity were values that mattered as much as survival itself.
As she packed her few belongings, Eileen reflected on her journey.
But she thought of her village, the family she had been taken from, and the path that had led her to this moment. She remembered the fear of capture, the rough ride to the ranch, the hard labor, and the countless lessons she had learned along the way. Each memory, each challenge, each act of courage had shaped her into the person she had become, a person ready to reclaim her freedom with dignity and honor.
The day of departure arrived.
The sun was bright, casting long shadows across the fields. Eileen stood at the edge of the ranch, taking a deep breath of the fresh morning air. She looked back at the barn, the fields, and the place that had been both a prison and a school. Silas approached, his expression calm but reflective. You are ready," he said simply. "Go with courage and wisdom. You have proven that freedom is not given lightly, but earned through strength of character." Aylin bowed her head slightly, acknowledging his words. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." She stepped forward, feeling the weight of her journey, the lessons learned, and the courage that had carried her this far. Each step was deliberate, a symbol of her determination to reclaim her life and honor her family. The journey home was long and arduous, yet Aylin moved with confidence and skill. She remembered the landscape she had studied during her captivity, noting the positions of rivers, hills, and trees. She remained alert, using every lesson she had learned to navigate safely. The memories of the ranch, the discipline, the observations, the quiet strategies she had employed, guided her along the way. Her mind was sharp, her body strong, and her spirit unbroken. Along the journey, Aylin encountered moments of reflection. She thought of the trials she had faced, the moments of fear and discomfort, and how she had remained composed and focused. She realized that courage was not a sudden act but a series of choices made consistently over time. She understood that freedom was not simply about leaving one place and returning to another. It was about earning the trust of oneself and others, acting with integrity, and demonstrating strength in thought, word, and deed. As she approached her village, Eileen felt a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. She wondered how her family would receive her, what they would think of the months she had spent away, and how she had changed in ways they could not yet understand. Yet she knew that the core of who she was, her courage, intelligence, and resilience, remained intact. She had survived, learned, and grown. Now she could bring those qualities home, enriching not only her own life, but the lives of those she loved.
When she finally entered the village, her family ran to meet her.
Her mother embraced her tightly, tears streaming down her face, while her younger brother clung to her side, laughing and crying at the same time. Aylin felt the warmth of home, the comfort of family, and the profound joy of return. She told them of her experiences in measured words, careful not to overwhelm them with the details of fear and struggle. Instead, she shared the lessons she had learned, the importance of courage, patience, observation, and honor. The villagers listened with a mixture of awe and admiration. They had heard of Eilin's capture and feared the worst, yet here she stood, alive, strong, and filled with wisdom. Her journey had transformed her, but she had retained the essence of who she was, a person of courage, intelligence, and dignity. The respect she had earned from Silas and the ranch hands was a reflection of her inner strength, and now she carried that strength back to her people. Eileen spent the following days reintegrating into village life. She helped her family with daily tasks, shared stories with the younger children, and worked alongside her community to strengthen their homes and protect their land. She had changed, But she also brought new skills, insights, and perspectives that enriched the lives of those around her. Her journey had been difficult, but it had not broken her. It had prepared her to contribute in ways she had never imagined. Evenings were her favorite time, when the sun painted the sky with warm colors and the village settled into quiet routines. Eileen would sit with her family, reflecting on her journey and the lessons she had learned. Desolus, the ranch, the trial, and the trust that had been granted to her.
She understood that true freedom was not simply the absence of restriction, but the ability to act with honor, intelligence, and courage.
Desk. She had earned her freedom not through force, but through strength of character. In the weeks and months that followed, Aylin became a source of inspiration for the village. Her story of courage, patience, and resilience spread quietly, reminding others that even in the face of hardship, dignity and intelligence could create opportunities. She had faced fear, endured captivity, demonstrated courage, and earned respect. Her freedom was a testament to the power of character, strategy, and patience. Aylin knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but she faced them with a quiet confidence. Bound and desperate, she had learned to navigate fear, build trust, and act with honor, even in difficult circumstances. These lessons would guide her for the rest of her life. She had returned home not only physically but with a mind and spirit strengthened by experience. She had survived, learned, and grown. And she would continue to thrive with courage, patience, and wisdom. The story of Aylin's journey was not just about captivity and freedom. It was about resilience, character, and the quiet strength that comes from facing adversity with intelligence and courage. She had transformed her situation into an opportunity to learn and grow, demonstrating that even in difficult circumstances, freedom could be approached responsibly and honorably. Her journey was complete, not simply in the physical sense, but in the moral and emotional sense as well. As the sun set one evening, casting its golden light across the village, Aylin stood at the edge of the fields, looking toward the horizon. She felt a deep sense of peace, gratitude, and hope. She had reclaimed her freedom, returned to her family, and earned respect through courage, intelligence, and patience. Her journey had tested her in every way, yet she had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever lay ahead.
In that quiet moment, she understood fully that freedom was not only about leaving a place, but about growing into the person capable of living it with honor,